exactly. Yeah. Do you have some more specific examples of how you've experienced God's word opening up to you that wasn't in the
Yeah,
translation?
let me give you a couple of examples from the first volume of my commentary. In Acts 2:46, the NRSV updated version translates day by day, as they spent much time in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts. The NIV has, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in
Mm,
their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And the impression you get from both of those versions is they only ate together at home.
mm,
And the Greek does not say that. The, the word for eating um, is that they ate food. And that's the main
mm,
verb of the sentence. And they so they ate food with glad and sincere hearts is the main part of the sentence. There are then two participle clauses,
mm,
day by day meeting together in the temple and breaking bread in homes. So
mm.
those two participle clauses are qualifying the um, they ate together, they ate food together with glad and sincere hearts. So they were
Mm.
eating together both in the temple and in their homes.
Yes.
Now, that's not terribly surprising because, of course, Jewish pilgrims would come and bring an animal or a bird to offer in sacrifice, and they would get part of it back to eat. And they
Mm.
would sit and eat in the temple courts. So eating in the
Yeah.
temple courts isn't terribly unusual, but it does suggest that the earliest part of the earliest Christians' evangelism was, as they ate together, other people might join them and
Mm.
overhear their teaching, overhear their speaking, as they sat together at meals with them, and came to faith that way. So I think that gives you it's a more interesting picture of their mission,
Mm.
but I think it's also a more accurate picture that it's not simply that they kind of went out and found people, but people
Yeah.
were attracted to this group that met in the temple.
Yes.
That's one. Another example is in chapter 6, where they the group appoint the 7 to look after the Greek-speaking widows, because there's a dispute between the Hebrew-speaking widows and the Greek-speaking widows. And the what they do is the apostles say, okay, we mustn't do this because that'll stop us doing the ministry of the word and prayer that's our priority. So you guys, the community, choose 7 people, choose 7 men to do this. And they do. And verses 5 and 6 of chapter 6, here's the NIV. Peter's proposal pleased the whole group. They chose Stephen, Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. The picture there is that the group choose the 7, they present them to the apostles then commission them by laying hands on and praying. The NRSV updated does exactly the same thing. They had these men stand before the apostles who prayed and laid their hands on them. That isn't what the Greek says. Um, the group who choose are the group who lay hands.
Mm.
In the Greek grammar, um, they chose. This pleased the community, and they chose Stephen, etc. They presented them to the apostles, and they prayed and laid hands on them. I don't think the they has changed.
Mm.
You're getting a picture of the whole community forming kind of like a scrum and laying hands on them and commissioning them. Now, that's symbolic of the way that leadership in the early community is not dictatorship. the apostles have said to the community, you choose these 7. Luke hasn't told us about the mechanism, and we'd love to know, but Luke has shown us that it's the community in whom the Spirit dwells who make the decision. And my reading of verse 6 is that it's actually the community who commissioned them by laying hands on them and praying for them, with the apostles standing there. So the apostles would have been part of this, but it's not just the apostles. So it's not a sort of, it's not delegation from the apostles downwards, it's delegation upwards from the community. So I think when you read the text carefully, you discover the picture isn't the picture we've got. And that's very different to the way we think of commissioning today. These 7 have been seen as the predecessors of deacons in the church. And they're never actually called deacons, although the verb diakonio, to serve, from which we get the word deacon, is there. But it's not that. It's kind of like the bishop lays hands on them, the apostles lay hands on them to commission them. It's the community. So those, I think, are 2 really quite interesting examples where a careful reading of the text gives you a different picture of what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think it's helpful how you can see how the second example is that how the subject change was, and it might not necessarily been intentional from the translators to do it, but that the Greek shows that more clearly how that works.
Yeah. I think it betrays the translator's assumptions about what's going on.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that when in Greek a subject change is usually signaled. So it's signaled from, so like, I think it's like, give an example. I have an example from Paul where that happens. When you're looking at what the body is that is laid in the tomb, like who's sown and then is raised, in 1 Corinthians 15:42, I think it is, if I remember correctly from the top of my head. It talks about it is sown in corruption and is raised in glory and so on. We have the same verb coming, 2 verbs coming 4 times in the text. And some commentators assume that it's not the same body that is sown that is raised, but grammatically that's impossible.
Okay.
Because if it had to be, like I think James Ware had pointed that out really well in an article he published in JBL a few years ago, where he says that if that was the case, if it was 2 different bodies, there should have been a ho, so it's like, or tinos or something like that, included before the second verb, because then it's not the same, and that should happen every time the subjects change. And so that was my point about like that Greek does have like, it usually signals if the subject change in a specific way, either by indicating it with a pronoun or by changing the person of the verb.
Yes.
So I just wanted to add to your point on that point. Yeah. So, but maybe we should like transition into talking a little bit more about like Acts. I think it would be interesting for people to know that before we turn to the like topic of eyewitnesses, why you actually were first of all became interested in studying Acts. Thank you for watching this clip. If you enjoyed it, you can find another one by clicking just over here. Or if you want to watch the full episode and dive a step deeper, you can find a link in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.